You're very welcome along to the CESI Staffroom. The CESI Staffroom is a podcast for teachers, about educators in general. Today's guest is Pam O'Brien. Pam O'Brien is a good friend of mine, so I'm delighted to have her on. I'll tell you, Pam is busy. She's a lecturer. She is an organiser of a conference, ICT EDU. She's a EU Code Week ambassador. She's a mentor for a CoderDojo, and she's a youth media team mentor as well. Now, I want you to remember that youth media team. That's an important one. You're going to want to listen to that. We're going to talk about where it all started for her, EU Code Week, youth media team. Stay tuned. You're going to like it.
Take me back to sixth year in school, and I remember we had some lecturers coming in from different colleges, and a guy called Mike Wallace came in from, as it was then, NIHE Limerick. He was in the maths department. I loved maths, so he sold me applied maths in NIHE Limerick, and that's where I ended up. I came out of there when it was University of Limerick rather than NIHE Limerick, so that is aging me, but anyway, there we go, with an applied maths degree. And I suppose my plan had been that I would get a job in the maths area, but back in those days, there weren't that many jobs in the maths area in Ireland. Now that has hugely changed since, but back then there really weren't that many jobs. So I took a job as an analyst programmer, delighted to get it, which again was a little bit different to where I thought I might end up, because when I went into college, and I talked to people in CESI and in lots of different areas about their love affair with coding and computer science and all that. I didn't have that. Maths was my first love, probably still is, but it's jostling with the computer science at this point in time. So I always thought that I'd end up in a maths job, and I did for a little while, but I kind of took a circuitous route. So I ended up working as an analyst programmer. And then after 7 years, I became company statistician for what was then Eagle Star, which is now Zurich. And then a few years later, I jumped ship again and I became a lecturer, which, as you say, you mentioned about having the greatest job in the world. I love my job. I love teaching. I love working with students, both our own undergrad students, postgraduate students, but also students in primary and secondary school. So it gives me, I suppose, lots of opportunities. And you mentioned, yeah, I am very busy, but I love doing the work that I do. I love all the different strings to the bow, because it just gives you a different perspective on lots of different things. So yeah, I am where I am. Not the most linear path, but here I am.
Yeah, but you every step you took, you knew where you were going, and that's important.
I'm not sure though, Has, and I suppose this is something that I see with students who are planning their next step after school, is that, and I suppose it's a feature of that age, is wanting to know where you're going next. I never foresaw, when I was in college, I never foresaw working as a programmer. I have to say, I didn't like programming, and we'll come to that later maybe.
Does anybody really like programming?
Well, I do now, I have to say. I love it. But at the time, I found it very challenging. It wasn't my natural comfort zone. So I didn't foresee a job as a programmer. I didn't foresee a job as a lecturer. I certainly didn't see myself in education, I have to say. So actually, in all the years that I've been working, the only job that I foresaw when I went into college was the one that I did for 4 years. So it's funny that that's where it's ended up. So I think just being open to what might come and where it might lead you. I suppose even now, because of the new technological university of the Shannon, that has opened up opportunities from a research perspective for me, which I'm loving as well. So you never know where you'll end up, I suppose, is what I'm saying.
So, I mean, what advice would you have? You brought this. I hadn't intended the chat to take this route, but so be it. And full disclosure, myself and you we're friends. We're good friends.
Absolutely,
we've been friends for a very, very long time. And I've never asked these questions, so bear with me. Like, from a student filling out their CAO form, looking forward, panicking, anxious, they're told do coding because that's everybody's told do coding at the minute. Like, how do you say don't worry about it because life will have its own? If what life has planned for you is going to happen, like, what advice do you have for students?
I know it's easy to say relax and it'll happen. I wasn't. I mean, I suppose I didn't. I didn't look to where I would be 30 years down the line. I never did that back when I was in school. I think sometimes, I think now, with the focus on CAO points and the focus on going to college and the focus on all of that, I think we're expecting a lot of our young people, because I think you just don't know. I mean, as I said, I would have laughed at you when I was in college, and if somebody said to me, "You'll end up lecturing," like, I'm facing into my 22nd year of lecturing, and I love it. I never saw that in my future. Never saw it in my future, and
Mm.
yet here I am, and I couldn't imagine doing anything else now. So I think it's hard to do it when you're that age, because there's so much pressure to get the good results. There's so much pressure to get the correct, course in college. But I think it works the way it works. And I know it's hard to see that at the time. I suppose, as an example, when I was in school, I loved chemistry and I loved maths. And when I put down my CEO choices, I put maths first and I put chemistry second. And for the 6 months after I put down maths first and chemistry second, I considered, should I swap them? And on about 40 occasions, I nearly did. And I didn't. I stuck with the maths in the end. If I had put chemistry first, I'd have made that work as well, or it would have worked as well. So I think you make a decision, and it's the best decision at that point in time. And I think you have to kind of make peace with the fact that there are lots of different options. There's lots of different ways of cutting lots of different things. And I think you just have to trust in it a little bit, and trust in yourself a little bit as well. You'll make things work.
And like, I have to be realistic. There's going to be damn all students listening to this, but it's the teachers that will be listening to this that will pass on the information to students. Coding as a career, and of course, I feel a bit fake, strange. It's a bit of a strange question coming from a man, but a woman in coding is like, how's that working out?
I suppose there's a lot of talk about, women in STEM generally, and
Mm.
having completed a maths degree, back in the late 80s, early 90s, it there weren't too many of us. That's for sure
No.
and certain. And actually, in fact, I think in some ways that has even gotten worse, particularly in the computer science area, I think. I never saw it as an issue. It was just what I wanted to do. So I loved maths. I do now love programming. I love the computer science area. I think all you can do is just do what you're doing. And even, for me, I would, I suppose, see part of my role is to help others and to help them to see what's there. I think as well, has just on the computer science, I think coding is one aspect of it, but I think one of the concepts that's maybe out there about coding or computer science is that it is just coding. But
Mm.
there are some very creative people out there. They can work on the front end side. There's people who are more interested in the networking side. And I think that's true of both computer science and maths. We kind of tend to pigeonhole and kind of say, and I'm not saying you're doing that, but it's just, I think we as a society tend to say, oh, I love maths or I hate maths, or I love coding or I hate coding, or those kinds of things. I think there's so many different aspects that you can
Well,
find
do you know what,
something.
Pam? That's a very good point. Computer science. Well, you say computer science to me, and the first thing I think of is coding, and I hate coding. Hate it.
Yeah, except that computer science is so much more. Like, if you look
But can
at
you
the
expand on that?
well, if
What
you
is
look at
computer science?
if you look at the applications that you interact with on a daily basis. So from your perspective, you've been involved in IT support, and you're involved probably a lot on that support side, the technical support side. But for me as a programmer, when I worked as a programmer, I was working on the systems that users used. I wasn't
Mm-hmm.
necessarily working on the front end side of it. I was working more on the back end side. And then you look at websites or applications that you use on your phone or games. So there's all of those different aspects. And even within that, if you have a team of people, you're very rarely going to be working on all aspects of a system, particularly if you get into a larger company. So you have a team of people who work on the front end. You have a team of people who work on the back end. You have the database administrators. You have the technical support people once it's gone live. You have the technical support people who support it, who deal with all that kind of thing. So there's something for everyone. It's just finding the bit that works for you. And I see, even, when you go into a classroom of, primary school children, and you're doing something like Scratch or Microsoft Make Code Arcade or something like that, you'll see some people, all they want to do is create the characters. And then other
Mm.
people are like, yeah, I don't really care what the character is. I want them to do this. And actually, a team is the people who create the characters, the people who decide what they're doing, the people who support it. So there's something there for everyone if you want it. Computer science isn't for everyone, just like chemistry isn't for everyone, just like geography isn't for everyone, economics isn't for, it's like that with every subject. But I think it's important to have some bit of an exposure to it so that you can see whether it's for you or not.
And like, I suppose there's a big push at the moment on for computer science. Some schools have a huge uptake, other schools do not. I'm in a few schools. One school that I'm in isn't. They don't have enough students to do computer science this year, but they did last year. Like, do you feel there's a like where does it fit? Is it an important subject that should be done, or are we still not seeing its value? I suppose
That's
I
it.
don't know where I'm going with that question, Pam, but it's kind of like, like English, we see its value, maths, we see physics, we see its value. Computer science, surely in today's industry, in 2023, surely computer science is now a valued must-do subject, or even a choice.
I think it is in some ways, but then I do have a bias around that. So
Yeah,
I'd put that out there. But
yeah,
I suppose computer science, it underpins everything we do. Every interaction. If you just look back at when COVID, when everything stopped on that 12th of March 2020, when everything stopped because of COVID, and you were told you couldn't go and see your granny and you couldn't visit this person, you couldn't do that, and you couldn't whatever. Technology stepped in. And lots of people, lots of grandparents use technology possibly for the very first time. So it's there, it's in everything we do. Like my nephew has emigrated to Canada, having a ball over there. But my mum
mm,
can contact him, can do a Zoom call with him or whatever, and feel like she's connected with him in a way that she didn't have that with her own family, because a lot of her family emigrated to London or to England when they were younger. And that connection just wasn't there. So when you look at somebody like my mother and that generation, they grew up with no technology. We grew up with some, and our children are growing up with technology everywhere. That
okay.
change in that short space of time has been mind blowing. So I think computer science definitely has a place. I think it's going to take time to develop it, because to teach computer science, it does take upskilling. It does take a concerted effort on the part of everyone, actually. I think, teachers obviously are stepping up and they're doing it, and it's fantastic what teachers are doing. But I think the support needs to be there from the broader community as well, and the broader educational community, I think, because otherwise it's just not going to happen in the way that it probably needs to happen, I think. And, if you look at, an accountancy firm, they have systems that they use all the time. The solicitors, everyone, the shops, everything has technology at the heart of what it does now. There's
Mm.
very
Yeah,
few walks of life where you can say the technology doesn't interact in some way with what you're doing.
yeah. See, I'm gonna roll it back there for a second. You mentioned something important, like the teachers are stepping up and they're upskilling. So, like that's something I want to talk to you about, and the efforts you're making. You covered so many different things. You covered, number one, you covered working with students, with kids, primary school. What I want to talk to you about is your work with teachers as well. But from an IT standpoint, and I think this is worth mentioning, and it'd be a bad thing if I didn't mention it. If you look at the county councils of Ireland, there's 1,000 computers in a county council. They might have 10 IT people. You look at the businesses, they have IT people on site. A school can have anything up to 200 200 devices, 200 computers, and now we're encouraging them or pushing them, coaxing them to use 365 or Google Cloud, which means now there's a cloud aspect to it. They have no IT people on site unless they have to either reach out to the likes of myself or Chris Reyna or whoever's out there on the CESI list. I think that's unfair. I just think that's very unfair. It adds a sour taste to the use of technology in an educational environment.
I'd have to agree, Has. I mean, like, if you take me as an example, I am very comfortable in the technology space. I'm very comfortable in the computer science space, but the tech support, the setting up printers, the getting all that working, just not what I want to do. I can do it, but it's
Mm,
not. I suppose, my strong point. And yet, if you're a teacher in a school who shows an interest in anything technological, then you're it. It's almost
Yeah,
like
yeah,
it's
yeah.
tag, you're it. And then you're chasing somebody to try and hand on the baton. And it's hard to do that. So you're expected to be, and this is, through no fault of the school, but it's just they're trying their best to bring technology in, to bring computer science in. So anyone who shows an interest becomes the person. If you're lucky, you have more than one person in the school, but a lot of the time it comes down to one really dedicated, really enthusiastic person. But then they become it for everything. They become it for, if there's any issue with a device, if there's any issue with the printers, if there's any issue with anything, they become it. And it's
Mm.
a huge ask. It really is a huge ask.
But here's the thing, it's not, if it was easy, I wouldn't have a job. This is like a point
Absolutely.
I was mentioning. It's they're looking at requests come in, and it's a printer down, and it's a thing, and the teacher is looking at me going, how do I make it work? And I'm going, it's taken me 5 years to
To
figure
get
out
to
how to
that
make it
point.
work.
Yeah, absolutely.
I can't explain it to you in 2 hours.
Mm.
And again, the example I use is relax. If it was easy, I wouldn't be employed in this. There wouldn't be a whole section of industry dedicated to what I do. But I just
Absolutely.
think it's
Yeah.
unfair. Now, Pam, talk to me about. I want, of course, we're Computers and Education Society of Ireland. I'll I'll quiz you about your involvement there. But first of all, your work with teachers. I think teachers would be very interested to hear this.
So I suppose over the years, I've been lecturing for more than 20 years at this point in time. And back then, when I started, there was no computer science formally in the primary or second level classroom. So we worked with local schools. We taught some of their students Java or web development or things like that. So I've been working with schools since I started lecturing. And I suppose over the years it's evolved that teachers want to upskill both formally and informally. So we've been running workshops, we've been running the ICT in Education Conference, we've been doing all of that from what was the Tipperary Institute, which became Limerick Institute of Technology and now has become the Technological University of the Shannon. And I suppose we saw a need a couple of years ago to formalize the qualification of and the workshops that we were doing. So we have a suite of programs up to master's level in computer science for teachers, and this is specifically for teachers who want to upskill both primary and secondary. And I know it's I suppose it's more geared towards the secondary, but when we were putting it together we were very conscious that we have worked with a lot of primary schools as well, so we put it together in such a way that there's a certificate program which is the first year, which primary school teachers could certainly get involved in and do that. If that's all they want to do, they could leave it there. But then if they wanted to go on to master's level or postgraduate diploma level, there's another year of thought modules as well, and that's looking at things like Python and databases and advanced embedded systems like Raspberry Pi and Arduino. And then there's, if you want to continue on to the masters, there is a 30 credit thesis that you can do. I suppose the reason we've done that is because we've seen a need for it. But
Mm.
I suppose it's difficult because you're trying to get teachers who are working, who are
Yeah.
also trying to upskill and fund it themselves. And that, I think, is a huge problem. And I think that's going to become problematic for computer science in the schools, because I think a lot of teachers do want to upskill, but the giving up of their own time and funding it themselves is definitely challenging, I'd say, is probably the easiest way to put it.
And because that's one thing I'm asked about all the time. I once a week, twice a week. How do we upskill? Where do we go to upskill? And there's a few places, and you have the solution.
Yeah, I suppose the thing about it is, has, and it goes back to you were saying that, when somebody asks you about, solving a problem that they have, it's taken you, 5 years or more or whatever number of years to be able to find
Mm.
that solution. It's very unfair to expect a teacher to go into a classroom and teach coding, because teaching coding isn't linear. You can't just
No.
say, in the way that you can bring a group along with you in other subjects in an easier fashion than you can with computer science. Because when you let students loose with, say, something like Scratch or Arcade or Microbit or something like that, they'll go in 40 different directions. And that's fine if you are comfortable with solving those problems. But they will run into a difficulty because they have put something, they've changed the order or something or whatever, and it just doesn't work the way it should. But sometimes if you're not terribly confident yourself, it can be very difficult to find those problems. And then you've got the rest of the class and you're trying to bring them along while you're solving a problem for one person. So the computer science classroom is a little bit of a different animal. And I think teachers need a lot of support to be able to make that work in their classroom. And, providing opportunities for upskilling, it's a no-brainer really. But I think we need to get a little bit serious about how we support those teachers when they're doing that.
I couldn't agree more, because coding is problem solving, and I know we're talking about computer science.
Yeah.
We're right back to coding
Yeah.
again, but coding is problem solving.
It is.
So
Absolutely.
that's its basis.
Yeah.
It's its essence. So why was coding invented? Was to solve a problem.
Exactly.
So,
But even if you look at, if you take it to another step, I suppose, I work with my students on, connecting websites and databases through a programming language. And any of that connectivity, as you know, any of that networking stuff, any of that connectivity is problematic. So if you have a student who has a problem, it could take you 20 minutes to solve that one problem for that one student. What I would say is the first year you do it, you don't know anything. You think you do, but you don't know anything. And then you see all these issues and problems and whatever. But as time goes on, you get more used to it. So, you start to recognize, oh, well, I've seen that before, try this. And you can empower the student to do it themselves. And that's what it's about as well. It's about empowering teachers to help them to empower their students. Because at the end of the day, computer science is, in no matter what form you take of it, it is about problem solving. IT support is about problem solving. Coding is about problem solving often. Even the front end stuff, it's about making sure that you can make things the way somebody else wants them. And sometimes that can be challenging. So I think it's about empowerment.
The teaching of computational thinking and problem solving is a very hard thing to do. So if you give, I've done this in workshops where you give a bunch of students some microbits or Scratch or whatever, and you say, here's an outline, make it do this. This is how you make it do this, this, and this. Go. My failing is when a student has a problem, I'll go up to the student and go, I don't see what the problem is. And I'll sit down and try and solve the problem. Whereas it's not my job to solve the problem. It's my job to point the student in the direction to solve the problem.
You have to guide them, though. You have to make them feel that they can do it. And I see that even when I'm teaching maths. It is a fine line. If you just solve it for them, then you're not making them a problem solver. But if you sit down with them and talk it through and discuss firstly, what the problem is. Secondly, do they have any options on how they think it might be solvable? And if they don't, then maybe tease it out with them and nudge them in the right direction without necessarily giving them the answer. But then that's difficult. If you've got 25 students in a class, you don't always have that time either. So
No.
It is challenging. It is definitely challenging.
It's very challenging. It's especially when, like you said it there. Well, for me, this is a very personal thing. So anytime anybody asks me to solve a problem, it's because they want me to solve the problem. But when you're doing a workshop, when you're working with students and they have a problem, my instinct is to solve that problem. Whereas my instinct should be to point them in the direction of solving the problem themselves. So yes, that I can see that's a problem. However, if you do this, this, and this, and I'm not going to say too much about him because he's going to be on the CESI Staffroom soon. Chris Reyna has a great approach to that, where he just says, "Go do it. Just come back to me." And that's a gift.
That is, and I think sometimes that approach definitely is needed. I think to get students to that point where they have the confidence, though, there's a bit more hand-holding needed in the beginning. Okay. It's actually remembering to let go of the hand, I think, as well. Right. I think you need to push them a little bit.
Pam, working with students, working in schools, youth media team. Talk to me about the youth media team. First of all, what is it?
So the youth media team, I suppose, was set up, as I mentioned, I am an organiser of the ICT Education Conference. And in 2013, we have a theme every year. And in 2013, our theme was student voice. And I was talking to Conor Galvin from UCD, and Bernie Goldback, one of my own colleagues, as I often did in the run up to the conference, about what the theme should be and what we should do, and could we innovate or could we do something different in different years. And we tried to bring different things in different years. And this year, because it was a student voice, Connor said, you know what, would we bring in a group of students and actually do it, rather than talking about it, rather than talking about students, let's talk to them. So, as was my want back then, I was like, how will that work? What kind of work is that going to make for me or whatever? And then I thought, you know what, let's try it. What's the worst that can happen? So we gathered a group of students and we brought them in, and we decided, and I suppose we made some decisions early on that I think really worked. Like, in so many ways, it really worked. We kept it as quite a stripped back process, but it was actually quite a sophisticated process as well. So we decided that they would come in and that they would report on the conference. So their remit, I suppose, was to go find people to interview, ask them a few questions, record a short interview. The interviews were kind of, 5 minutes ish, maybe less, maybe more in some cases. But that was kind of the thing. And then they had to record it. And the rule was you had to write a blog post, publish the blog post, and tweet it. And until the tweet went out, the job wasn't done. So that was, I suppose, our rough decisions around that.
Let's just summarize for a second, right? So you decided it would be a good idea to train up some students to, number one, find somebody to interview them, bring that interview back for post-production, write a blog post about that interview, and then tweet. Are those all the moving parts?
That was, except I'm going to correct you a small bit. We decided not to do post-production.
Oh, okay.
It was good enough. That's the decision.
Right.
Because we felt that if we went for post-production, you'd be there for the year and it would never be good enough. So you got kind of one shot at it. And that was the best decision we ever made, I have to say. But actually, just going back to the empowerment and the computer science, I suppose that underpins what we did here, because we kind of got out of the way. So we had, the mentors are very important in youth media team, I have to say. I think having that support, the students need it, but the mentors got out of the way. So we worked with them. And the way it would normally work, and I suppose we had a process, just going back to, I suppose, the first one, it worked better than any of us could ever have imagined or ever have hoped. I mean, they completely stole the show. I'm not sure were you at the conference that year, but they completely blew everyone out of the water. I mean, they just rocked up in their red t-shirts, and that was another decision. Connor said, let's give them t-shirts of a particular color, and the rule was you couldn't say no to a red t-shirt. So if you were asked for an interview, you couldn't say no. And the red t-shirts back then were red t-shirts from Dunn's. That's what it was. I went out, bought a load of red t-shirts, and they all wore a red t-shirt. But we decided then, because of that success, that we would take them on the road. And I suppose some of the things that we did, we put a process in place. So we had a tent, which we didn't have the first time around, but Connor decided that maybe, having our own space, our own place that you could get people to come to, or that was marking out our territory, I suppose it was. But actually the other side of it was, in pitching our tent in the morning, that got us into the process. So we would leave Tipperary generally at about 6 or half 6 in the morning to go to an event on a Saturday morning. A lot of Saturday mornings were spent doing that. We'd rock up, we'd pitch our tent, but in the pitching of our tent, we'd start chatting about, the event and what we wanted to do, where we wanted to take that day, who we might want to interview. So the process was all tied up together. And then we'd have a look at the schedule and pick out the main people we wanted to interview, and then pick out some other people as well. So the process was all part of it. And then we'd kind of work with them. So we'd get them to do a little bit of research. So again, it was empowering them to do the work. We didn't sit down and say, these are the people you're going to interview, these are the questions you're going to ask. this is how you do it. It was very much working in collaboration with them. Now, there were a couple of exceptions. Obviously, if we had somebody very high profile, we had a different process to go through. But for the most part, most of the interviews we did was on that basis. So the students themselves would do a little bit of research. They'd find out a little bit about the person they were going to interview, particularly the keynote speakers and things like that. They would kind of come up with questions, and then we'd sit with them as mentors and just work those questions with them and just discuss with them maybe a slightly better way of asking the question. Or but as time went on, we didn't have to do that very much at all. So then they would interview together, and we made a decision as well that it wasn't a solitary process, that people would work together. So you'd have two people, and that would give them a little bit of, I suppose, breathing space. So if you had two people interviewing, they'd take it in turns to ask the question, so they had a bit of time to kind of settle, get ready for the next question. So it was a process that worked very well. The benefit of it as well, which became apparent later, was as we brought new members into the team, because we had this double interview kind of style, then we could just slot a new member in with a more seasoned member, and then they just trained each
Mm.
other up. So it was a win from our point of view. But it was a very, very powerful setting, I suppose, for the young people. I mean, they got to interview amazing people. They got to interview it just to go
That
to
brings me to
amazing
my
people.
next question. Talk to me about. So, talk to me about some of the people that you got to interview.
Well, I suppose the most high profile person that we got to interview was Uachtar and Michael D. Higgins. That was a real coup. I mean, the
Mm.
excitement that time was just
How?
phenomenal.
How?
But
How
do you
does
know what?
that happen?
Well, you see, we were invited to Failsha, and the president was going to speak at Failsha, so we got first dibs, and it was fantastic. So we got to do that. Now, with that one, I think we had to send the questions beforehand just for pre-approval, which was fine. We worked on
Yeah,
that,
it's
and we
fine.
got that done.
Yeah.
But the great thing about that interview was, we were all prepared for the interview with the president, and we did all that, and it was fantastic. And everyone was involved, because we had some people taking pictures, and we had some people, because of that one, and it was such a high profile one. I was very conscious that we needed to bring the entire team in. The
Mm.
youth media team isn't about any one person. It never has been. It's about the team. So we would always, try and share the load. And that one, we actually put the names in a hat. We didn't pick who would do it or whatever. It wasn't our most seasoned people that were chosen for it. Names went into a hat. We chose it that way, and I think it was the only way to go, really. But after the interview, the president's wife Sabina was there as well, and we got an opportunity. I can't even remember how it happened, but we got an opportunity to ask Sabina some questions as well. And
Wow.
it was completely from nowhere. And the lads just clicked in because they had been empowered, because they had done this process so many times before. They didn't even blink. Like it was a do it now or you don't get it at all. It wasn't
Mm.
a come back in an hour and we'll be ready. It was literally, you have an opportunity. Are you going to take it or not? And we did. And that one blew me away, I have to say. They just did it. They were brilliant. They really were. They were fantastic. And I was just standing on the sidelines thinking, "Oh my God, how did this happen?" So it was great.
That's my question. Like, how did this happen? It sounds, you can tell in your voice that you're proud of them and you're very
Oh my
excited
God,
about the
absolutely.
project.
I mean, just watching them grow in confidence. And that's the thing. That's what I loved about my involvement with the youth media team, is you took in a student who was quite young, often like 12, 13, 14, and you just saw them grow in confidence. Like those guys just rocked up to the president of Ireland and asked their questions. And then when it came an opportunity to pivot and on the fly ask some questions of his wife Sabina, they did that as well. So, but they had the confidence to do that. So it's great to see that evolution in students. It prepares them. It prepares them for what's coming, down the line. And that age can be tricky for students as well. It can be, they've a lot going on. They've a lot going on in school. They've a lot going on maybe at home. You just don't know. They've a lot going
Mm.
on in their own personal lives. They're evolving from being a child into an adult, and that's tricky. So giving them a bit of confidence to take on those challenges was a privilege, I have to say, from my perspective.
Pam, giving them a voice is important. A lot of time, students of that age, in that age bracket, don't have a voice, and that's their thing. They're in this environment, and there's loads of voices and there's loads of noise, but they don't have a voice. And if you're anyway shy at all, the fear is your voice will never be heard. What you did is you enabled them. now they have a voice. That's a huge thing, and I'm harping on about this for a long time. Enabling like every school, in my humblest of opinions, should have a youth media team. Now, this always gets thrown back in my face by they go, oh, we don't have time, we don't have enough. Make the time, because the skill set that you gain from researching somebody, talking to somebody, and publishing your work is a big deal. It's huge.
I couldn't agree
I've
more.
just seen
Yeah.
it too many times.
As the other thing I think as well, we often talk about students. We don't always talk to them. And I think it's important that you talk to them and let them talk to us. And just going back to the conference thing and the shyness and whatever, it's maybe hard to believe now, but I was that shy student. I wouldn't have said boo to a goose back then. So I see that in the students, and sometimes, when you're mentoring a group like that, you have to watch. And that's the job of a mentor. It's the watching. It's seeing the one who fades into the background and bringing them forward in a way that's okay for them, not putting them in a spotlight that they're not okay with, but actually supporting them and putting them with somebody who will bring them along. And that's the thing. There were a lovely group. All the groups that I worked with over the years were fantastic, and they were always really supportive of each other, and they were very much a team. And I have to say, one of the things I loved most about the youth media team when we were up and down the country was they were often in my car at 6 o'clock in the morning on a Saturday morning.
Yeah.
And, the mornings were a bit quieter, but coming home in the evenings, I'd think, okay, they're wrecked now after the day. And, there won't be people at them. Should they be singing? And we'd be putting on music. And invariably, as we got close to home, John Denver's Country Roads would blare
Yeah.
from my car. But it was great because we'd stop, for a bite to eat, and we'd chat and we'd talk about what we did for the day, and we'd talk about what was their favorite part of the day. And it wasn't always about the day. It was, we just chat about different things and whatever. So it was great. It was, as I said, it was a privilege.
I think it's a big deal. I think not an awful lot of people know about the youth media team, and I think those who have met the youth media team or have encountered the youth media team will always say, nobody has ever come back to me and said, oh, nothing bad has ever
which
said
is
about them.
extraordinary.
They're a credit to their mentors, like, to do the job that they're doing. And you mentioned that you were that person, you were that quiet person. I was that quiet person before I got into IT. I was in radio, and I call it red light syndrome. That you that red light goes on, you do the thing, and the red light goes off, and you can go back into yourself again. But I just think every school needs it. Just that skill set to put yourself out and to know you'll be fine.
That's it. And I suppose the other thing to say is, there might be a perception that we had all this kit, this equipment that was
going to be my
amazing.
next question. Yeah, where did it come from? Like, what is the kit?
A bit
What's
of
involved?
sellotape here and there. There wasn't a whole lot. Now, look, I suppose we started off with a couple of iPads. So that was our stock and trade. We had a couple of iPads and we had a couple of Camara laptops. So winging a prayer. I mean, we didn't have expensive kit. As I said, we made a decision, no post-production, because it would never be good enough. And sometimes the lads would stutter over something, but that was all part of the charm. Now, there was very few times that we actually restarted an interview. It was, you start, you go, and that's fine. And I suppose we took a couple of decisions that made a huge impact on how we evolved, because if we had post-production, it would have taken weeks and months and nothing would have gotten produced. Often when we came out of an event, we might have 10 interviews recorded, published, blog posted, and tweeted. That was so by 5 o'clock when we were leaving, it all had to be done, because otherwise I was going to be spending my weekend getting everything done. So it was very much it's good enough. It's good and it's perfect. But the equipment was more about facilitating rather than getting in the way. And those were the decisions we made, and it was a very important one. So we literally just used apps on the iPad to record. We would then publish those, and they would be published, for the most part, they would go straight live. So there wasn't even an opportunity to listen back or whatever, because there just wasn't the time. But anyway, it was on the fly, and that was the whole beauty of it, was that it was done like that. And then we had the couple of laptops to write up the blog posts on. and that was it. There was a few times when we had a bit, more sophisticated equipment. With Bernie had access to that from the creative multimedia programs in Clonmel, but we generally did it very much stripped back. So any school could do it. It's not about having, thousands of euros worth of equipment. It was about using devices that we already had access to.
Yeah, I think there should be more of it. There should be more media studies. There's another side to media studies as well, like the critical thinking. It teaches critical thinking.
Sure.
But that's a talk for another day. I firmly believe that there should be. It's in the we talk. So let me just bookend the youth media team story. So we talk about all the amazing stuff that's going on in other parts of the world, but we're doing it here. Like youth media team is a big deal. I don't know anybody else that has put the dedication, the time, and the blood, sweat, and tears into the youth media team like yourself, Bernie, and Connor. And I do want to bring you, the three of you, to talk about the youth media team at a different stage. But look, I said it a million times, I'll say it again. Every school needs a youth media team. You have a website, you have a Twitter account, you have a Facebook account. Get a youth media team. Get them to support it. So we spoke about youth media team. CoderDojo. What, Pam? Because like you don't have enough to be doing, so now you're in CoderDojo.
Well,
How? What?
that developed because my children were at an age, I suppose, where they well, I wanted to give them an opportunity to experience coding, and it's not always easy to do it yourself when you're at home or whatever. So I saw the CoderDojo Limerick had started in September 2011, and I brought my son with me to see what was going on. And then I think they brought Scratch in a couple of weeks later, and I brought my daughter and my niece, and that was kind of the start of it. And then I was a mentor, and I will probably always be a CoderDojo mentor. So CoderDojo is a global, free, volunteer-led series of programming clubs for kids from 7 to 17, so children and teens. It's Everyone is different, I guess, because it depends on the mentors that you have. I've been involved in Limerick. I set up the Nina one, and I've been involved in the Thurles one as well. So I've been involved in all of them over the years. COVID kind of put a stop to them for a little while, but we're getting back up and running. So we've had Limerick back up and running last year. We weren't in a position to bring Nina or Thurles back, but we're looking at doing that again. And I suppose it's just about providing opportunities for kids to learn coding, because it's not always possible in the schools, as you said. So it's in some cases it's about teaching them Scratch or teaching them different things. In other cases, it's just about providing a space that they can work together on projects, and we can mentor them or we can help them, but actually they're doing their own thing. They just want to meet other people who are doing their thing like they are doing their thing.
Is there any other, like, is there clubs around the country? Can anybody set up a club? How do you set up a club?
Yeah, so you can, if you look at, if you Google CoderDojo, you can add a club, and there are loads of them around the country. I think COVID, unfortunately, like a lot of things, it kind of put a stop to a few things, or put a pause. I think things are opening up a lot. We made a decision that because we were in person, we made a decision that obviously we couldn't go in person for quite a while. We decided not to go with the online because I suppose you've got a lot of younger children, and then that, with the whole being online, it would have introduced a lot of complexity. That it's volunteer, it's all, it's completely volunteer led. So it would have put a lot of extra work where we were already very stretched anyway. So we made a decision when we couldn't meet in person that we wouldn't do it online. We used to send out some materials to people for a period of time, and then we came back with CoderDojo Limerick last year. And yeah, it's a great thing to be part of. Like, as I said, I got involved when my children were kind of at that age, but they're not anymore. And that's fine. But I'm still involved because you get an energy when you see that spark in a young person's eyes when they move something around the screen or they create their own game for the first time. Nothing beats it.
Mm. It's something I'm asked about again, setting them up and how to go. And I'm always so, I don't know where to start. So really just go to the internet, look it up.
Look up the CoderDojo website, and there's loads of information. There's resources, you name it, it's there. There's so much help
One
and
of the
support.
best definitions I've heard for CoderDojo was it's effectively taking an anti-social activity. So coding back in the day was just coding, focused,
Very solitary.
yeah, and it's making it social. So
Yeah.
you're coding shoulder to shoulder with somebody. That learning process
Yeah.
is.
And you have other people to ask. If something goes wrong, you have other people to ask, and that's how you learn. I suppose it's kind of an informal way of doing things.
I suppose that ties nicely into sort of EU Code Week ambassador. So let's just stop for 1 second, Pam. Now I know you have a great job, right? Because that's an in joke where Pam every now and then will text me going, I have to do a thing in a school and the kids are amazing. Oh my God, I have a great job. So that's that's an ongoing thing. So you have the great job. You're a lecturer. You're working with students. You have the youth media team thing we call it, CoderDojo thing. You're EU Code Week ambassador as well. So EU Code Week. What?
So EU Code Week is a pan-European grassroots movement which aims to bring coding and digital literacy to everyone. So it's about making it accessible, not just for children. So I suppose it's a little bit different from CoderDojo in that perspective. It's just making it accessible for all. It's supported by the European Commission, and there is a community in each country, or there's an EU Code Week team in each country. So there's an educational coordinator, there are a number of ambassadors, and there are a series of leading teachers. So I'm lucky to work with Julie Power as one of the 2 EU Code Week ambassadors in Ireland. I've been involved for the past few years. I suppose being involved in CoderDojo and being around coding as much as I have been over the years, EU Code Week was always going to be something that was, that I was involved in. So as part of Code Week or CoderDojo, we used to organise events. So we had the Mega Dojo event in CoderDojo Limerick over a number of years to coincide with Code Week. I've known the other Code Week ambassadors. So Mags Amond was a former EU Code Week ambassador. Eugene McDonough was a former EU Code Week ambassador. And when I was asked a couple of years ago to get involved, it was really a no-brainer for me. So I work with Julie on just raising the profile of EU Code Week in Ireland. EU Code Week happens every year in October, and it's really just about, helping people and supporting people to create activities around coding for Code Week.
How do you get involved with EU Code Week? How do schools get involved with EU Code Week?
Well, it's very easy, really. If you look up codeweek.eu, which is the Code Week website, you can just see there's resources there. There's an activity map. So every country pins activities. So you can just create an activity yourself. You can decide you're going to run an activity. And lots of schools are doing coding anyway. So if we could get teachers and people to just pin the activities they're already doing. We're not asking you to, do a specific activity because, as I said, a lot of schools are doing coding activities every week anyway. So teachers or anyone can create an activity and pin it to the map, and that will just help to spread the word in Ireland or in any country. And again, you can just have a look on the Code Week website, codeweek.eu. There are resources there to use. If you don't have ideas, you can do both plugged and unplugged activities. So unplugged activities are more the computational thinking exercises, so the algorithmic thinking exercises. So it's not restricted to coding. It can be anything in the computer science area.
So I like the one thing I'm going to hang on is you're saying that if schools are doing stuff already, just tell us you're doing them rather than you don't have to do something new as well as what you're doing already.
Absolutely.
Just highlight what you're doing.
Yeah, any activity around coding, around computer science is a valid activity. And they're all happening. I mean, you're in schools, I'm in schools. They're all happening anyway.
Now, the one pushback on any of these things is always that we're busy. We're already busy doing stuff, and I've said it before in the CESI staff room. But I think what you said is very important. That if you are doing stuff already, like the reason you're busy And if it's to do with coding, let us know and pin that to the map.
Exactly. But the other thing about it is, if you put it on the map, then other teachers might see that and say, oh, that's a good idea. Maybe I could do that. So it's actually
Mm.
just about spreading awareness about the types of things you can do. It's not the very narrow coding focus. That's the key message, I guess.
Your involvement with CESI, so CESI, Computers in Education Society of Ireland, creator of the CESI Staffroom. When and how did you come across CESI?
So I got involved in the ICT Education Conference. We've ran our conference since 2004, and I've been involved, I suppose, in that I turned up and did things from 2004. But in 2008, I was asked to get involved in the organisation of the event. And I suppose over the years, I got to know about CESI. So I think it was 2008 was my first conference. And one thing that always strikes me about that first conference was it was a bit nerve wracking. I mentioned I was the shy student back in the day, and that person is still there. So going to an event like that is a bit nerve wracking when you don't know people, and it's something I always try to kind of bring into our conference and just make sure that people are, to make it easy for people to chat to people and whatever. So I went along to the first one, which I think was in Fairhouse, but actually it was such a great experience. And being an introvert and not being terribly comfortable in the social scene can be a little bit difficult, but something like CESI is just so warm and welcoming, and you meet other people and you get plenty of opportunities to chat. So once I went, that was it. I was going to go forever, really, and I have been.
Mm.
I think I've missed one over the years, and that was for a very good reason, because my sister's hen party was on that weekend. So that's the only one I've missed, to the
Oh,
best of
well
my
done.
knowledge. So yeah, it was either be excommunicated at home or miss the CESI conference. So
The message is Computers in Education Society of Ireland. Get involved. Find out about the conferences.
absolutely,
Find out
yeah.
about the CESI list. We're here. We support teachers. It's what we do. Pam, you're again doing so many things. You're also, I mean, up here, pointing at it here. You're also a fan of origami. Like
I couldn't
how?
recommend. Yeah, I couldn't
How?
recommend it highly enough.
What? D-
Well,
Expand on that.
origami for me is not about work though. Origami for me is relaxation. It's about
Mm,
it's mindfulness in another guise. I mean, I saw when my granny was alive, she used to knit and crochet and do all that kind of stuff. And I see origami in a very similar way, because you're focused on the next fold. You're folding
mm,
paper. So origami, for those who don't know, is paper folding. There's lots of different kinds of origami. I love modular origami. So it's where you put together units. You make units or modules and you put them together to make structures. So, for example, I've got this little one here. So there's a number of different units. I think there's 8 units in this one. So you make one individual unit, you put them together. So there's 8 sheets of paper on this, and you put it together and you've got a 3D structure. What I love about it is when I'm stressed, origami is my release. It's
mm.
because I'm focusing, and it's very tied into computer science. It's tied into maths. There's a logical, you take a logical approach to it. There's an algorithm you follow. You do the same steps. You put it together. So there's the same steps to create the modules. There's the same steps to put it together. So again, this is one. This is a nice little fidget toy. And again, each of these units is actually very straightforward. So you got one sheet of paper for each unit.
So describe that for those who can't see, for those
So
for
it's
the
it's
audio.
called. I'll just take it apart a little bit. It's I suppose a snake in some ways. It has come, but it's very tactile, so you can see. And if I just take out one of the units, you'll see. So it looks quite impressive, even if I do say
Mm,
so myself. But actually, this is a unit. So there's just
okay.
so there's maybe, I don't know how many, there's maybe 50 or 60 units in this one, but you just put all those units together. So you start off with a plain sheet of paper, and I'll just unwrap this. So just to show that there is no snake oil here, that's it. And then you just fold it in, and that's your unit. And then
Okay.
you put all those units together and you get this. But even for a class, if you want them to, just to relax into something, it's a nice little activity to do, and you don't have to do this. I make these sometimes when I'm, when I'm watching television or whatever, because it just, if I'm If my mind is going, it just helps me to settle my mind, because when you're working on origami, you have to focus on the next fold. That's all you're focusing
Yeah.
on. So it kind of helps you to empty your mind. And I have to say, the last few weeks have been quite busy, um, for lots of different reasons, and I haven't done any paper folding for a while. I miss it. So when I need to I suppose, ground myself, this is where I go. I go back to the
Okay.
origami, because it just helps me to do that.
Pam, you're amazing.
Thank you.
I love the paper folding idea. I love the origami idea. I love getting the gifts from you. So
It's nice to be able
that's
to give them.
class. Yeah, well, fair play, fair play. Now I can't let you go, right? You've turned paper into 3D objects. You're the busiest person in the world. You're a coder, lecturer, friend. MakerMeet, your involvement with MakerMeet, MakerMeet Ireland,
So
like,
Maker Meet Ireland has been a long time in the making. As
hmm
you know, has Maker Meet Ireland evolved from a conversation, or a number of conversations that I had with Bianca Nigrogon. Bianca, as you know, was very much about maker education, project-based learning, tinkering, all of that good stuff. And you and I and Bianca had a number of conversations, and we talked about Maker Meet and setting up a Maker Meet. And we did, before Bianca passed, we had a couple of Maker Meets, and it has evolved from there. So it's very much a, I suppose, project from the heart. It's something I'm very, 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 I suppose, invested in. My doctoral studies are in the area of informal learning, which is all about what Maker Meet is about. It's about learning through doing, the incidental learning that happens when you're trying to make something, and you're not necessarily focused on the learning. You're focused on trying to do something, make something. It's all of that good stuff. Love it, every
for
bit of it.
those that don't know what a maker is, how do you define a maker? Now, again, I have to, full disclosure, I'm involved with MakerMeet. I am part of MakerMeet. This is not an ad. This is not an ad for MakerMeet. So just get that out of the way. Um, what is a maker? What makes a maker a maker?
I suppose, I mean, everyone is a maker in some shape, maker form. I mean, when I think back to my dad, like, he was always able to eh, fix things. You know, if a washing machine broke, he was able to fix it. If he wanted to make something, he would do that kind of thing. So the men's sheds, they're all makers. But every classroom is a maker. If you think of the arts and crafts that happen in primary schools, that's all maker based. So you're doing things, you're making things, and it can be everything. It can be anything. Origami is making. So there's no start and end to it. I would say it's in everything we do. I think what we've done sometimes in education is we put things in boxes, and I think we've forgotten that actually, in everything we do, if you want to, you know, create something, whether it's putting together furniture, flat pack furniture, that's making. There's more creative ways of doing it, putting together projects for embedded systems, that's all making. It's there in everything we do. We do it all the time, but we don't see it as learning. And that's, I suppose, where I'm very interested in it, because we don't see it as learning, but the learning that happens when we're making is just so powerful, because we're doing it to fulfill a real life, or to find a solution to a real life problem. And that's where the real strength of it comes in, I think.
How do schools, like, I mean, it's a tough one. It's a tough, I don't know the question I'm trying to figure out, but like, from my point of view, I'd like to see a makerspace in every school in Ireland.
Yeah.
But the problem there, Pam, I'm dealt with every single day, and I don't think schools realize this, is there already is
A
a
makerspace. Yeah.
makerspace in
Yeah.
every school in
Well,
Ireland.
if you have
And
paper and paper clips and all those kinds of things, then you've got a makerspace. Do you know what I mean? That's the reality of it. Like, this is sheets of paper.
mm,
That's all it is. Sheets of paper. Nothing more, nothing less. And that's only a small thing, but you know, every classroom has a plethora of things that you can put together. and make a makerspace. One of my favorite, I suppose, activities I do with students is the paper towers challenge, where you give them 10 sheets of paper and nothing else, and they have to create a structure that will support something like this 100-gram bag of rice. And this is how much I use it, because it's right here. I hadn't planned on talking about this at all, but it's there. So it's a 100-gram bag of rice, double bagged, and that's so the structure that they make. 10 sheets of paper, no more, no less. So, a lot of people think, oh, a makerspace, I need laser printers and or 3D printers and cutters and all these kind of laser cutters and all that kind of stuff. You don't. The most basic of things. We did a workshop with a group of young scientist winners in Microsoft a number of years ago, and we used, I think it was cans of soft drinks as the things that now, not for the paper towers, actually. That was for a bridge one. Sorry, I'm getting my workshops confused. But again, it can be a bar of chocolate that they have to support. It can be anything. It doesn't really matter what it is, but it's actually just about the idea of how can you turn flat sheets of paper into something that will support a weight. That's what it's about. It's about being creative in how you go about things. And as I said, any school can do that.
Yeah, it's about a learning space more so than making.
Yeah.
That's the confusing part, is because so often the tinkerers, the makers are involved sometime with technology. So the nerds of the world might have a 3D printer, so I'll 3D print that thing to fix something else. The assumption is that,
which is great too.
You need it is, but it's not the essence of a makerspace.
Absolutely not. Couldn't be further away from it, to be honest. In my view.
The TOG is a makerspace in Dublin, and they take great pride in the fact that they made a pizza oven.
Yeah.
And that's just the way they. So it's about involving technology in making, and I've said it before, and I think you said it there as well. Making makerspaces. Classrooms have been makerspaces since the very first Christmas card was ever made in a classroom with arts and crafts.
Yeah. But how many of you have a dad who, made things or fixed things or tinkered with something? That's what it's about. It's about tinkering and making and discovering. It's about discovery more than anything else. It's not about a linear path to what you're going to learn. It's actually about discovering that, in the example of the paper towers, cylinders don't work terribly well because they unravel, but maybe, a triangular structure might work better. But again, the only way to do that is to try them and see what works and what doesn't work. That's the beauty of it. That's what I love about it, personally.
I think if you want to know more about workshops, that could be a CESI staff room in itself, where we get
absolutely
to talk about some workshops that work. Pam O'Brien, thank you very much for joining us in the CESI staff room. Again, I said it at the start, it's going to be a half hour. That was 45 minutes ago. That was more than 45 minutes ago. So, Pam O'Brien, thank you very much for joining us in the CESI staff room. I hope to talk to you again soon. Enjoy, or keep enjoying, doing what you're doing, and chat to you soon.
Thanks for having me, Haas. Great to have the chat.